Well, for nearly 2,000 years on this very evening, Christians have gathered the night before Easter Sunday, and they recounted the activity of God within their midst. 12 Old Testament lessons would be read, including the story of creation, the Passover narrative, the story of Jonah, the crossing of the Red Sea, the entry into the Promised Land, as well as the story of the Valley of Dry Bones. And then at some point, someone would undoubtedly begin to talk about Jesus and what happened to him. We don't have a record of that part of the service, but you can bet a good portion of the account might have started with what we know about Palm Sunday, continuing with the Passion, and then, beyond question, you know it had to have progressed into the familiar story of the resurrection, the empty tomb. But it's anybody's guess what form that took. And that is why I'm so grateful that I did work for the best boss anyone could ever have. In the midst of his 10th decade of life, he has penned the following poem, which could have very well been not unlike the story told one another as they gathered in the first century around the first flame of Easter, the light of Christ, prior to baptisms in cold, rushing water. This is my friend Bill Maxwell's poem. It started on a donkey. Imagine those brand new to the faith listening to it for the first time. It was not an official parade. No parade license, no important politician riding high on a big white stallion. It was just a religious fanatic riding on a donkey and a gang of peasant followers who were hoping to make a small impact on the Passover celebration. The Roman authorities consulted the Jewish establishment about the threat to peace and quiet. There had been a restlessness this year, and no one wanted trouble. So it was decided that the man on the donkey, who was apparently allowing the troublemakers to use him, had better be dealt with. So they found him that night with a handful of his friends, tried him, and proceeded with his crucifixion, since 2 were already scheduled. And that seemed to quiet things down. But something happened. And the handful of followers proceeded to turn the world upside down. He is the Christ, the Lord, his followers said, and God has raised him from the dead, and nothing will ever be the same. And it appears that they were right. A new life took hold in the world, and Jesus is Lord, and the Lord is risen were heard over and over and over throughout the years. That little parade on the donkey wasn't a hint of the joy that was to come. The donkey would be surprised. The donkey who brought our Lord into Jerusalem would have indeed been surprised. Thanks to him or her, Jesus entered into glory and drew all of us into the mixture of salvation and redemption. And tonight, dear friends, we simply celebrate that and rejoice. We are now his body, and thanks be to God, by baptism, we dwell in him, and he dwells in us. And so, as we liturgically see the sun set in the west, even though we know it's still Saturday night, on this, the first service of Easter Sunday, let us not just rejoice, but commit ourselves to being the presence of Christ in a world so desperately in need of the news of God's grace, pouring itself with exuberant abundance over the entirety of creation. It was for this that our Lord lives and reigns. Amen.